as the Joker would say, off we go. Right, so how do people behave online? The bad iPod-esque silhouettes are intended to demonstrate the fact that although we are all, beautiful, unique snowflakes in the true Fight Club sense, we do tend to exhibit certain repeatable, predictable behaviors, which is kind of why marketing works. It's kind of why psychology works, why cognitive science works. It's because we're not really as unique as we think we are. And online, the ways in which we behave, don't worry, I will zoom in a moment. The main behavior which people exhibit online is referred to as scanning. So if we zoom in for a moment, and I'll take you to a bit of the screen that actually has some information. Here we go. So scanning refers to the behavior where people, when they arrive at a web page or at a website, do not, and I repeat that again because it's important, what they do not do is pause, clear their mind of everything else that's going on, concentrate, and think logically about what it is that they think you're trying to communicate and the way that you've chosen to communicate it, and kind of ride your wave, which in a nice world would happen. In the bad real world, what happens is they're doing what they're doing, and they're bringing a set of assumptions and a set of impatiences and whatever it may be about how they expect your site to work. And what they will do, as these diagrams show, the red hot colours are where people are looking at pages most often and for the longest period, and the cooler colours are where people are not looking on a page. This is from an eye tracking study where you bounce a laser on someone's eye, hopefully not blinding them in the process, and get that sort of data. And what you can see, if we go across a bit, even though these pages all have slightly different patterns, the important things are that A, people are not looking at everything uniformly, which tells us that people are just jumping around trying to get a gist of what's going on. B, that there's a strong left-hand dominance towards the left-hand margin, which you would expect because we're in the culture where we read from left to right. And also, of course, that there's more of a dominance towards the top of a screen rather than the bottom of the screen. And if we look at this is one study, the second study down here shows the same sort of ziggy-zaggy, lefty-righty, uppy-downy pattern happening, to give it its technical term. So this means, of course, that when someone arrives on a page, it's going to be difficult to assume that we know what they're going to look at automatically, because they're going to be jumping around a page in order to get an idea of what's going on. So this is a fundamental behavior which we need to be aware of and which we need to design for, so that we're conscious of the fact that we have to attract people's attention to important bits. We are not going to be able to assume that they read the whole page and then make a logical decision on that basis. They will not. Another fundamental behavior is ad blindness, and this refers to, if we just zoom in here, these areas at the top and along the right-hand side of pages tend not to get looked at. If we look at all of these screens, we can see there's a consistent pattern. People aren't looking at the top, they aren't looking at the right-hand edge where the related links often are. They tend to look at the content area, where if this was a road, that would be the tarmac. The rest of the stuff would just be scenery. Not unreasonably, if they arrive on your site, they're arriving for a reason of their own, the audience. They've got their goal, they've got their question, whatever the case may be. So they're going to try and get an answer to that goal or question in the content area. What they're not going to spend a lot of time doing, all things being equal, is looking at your lovely related links or banner ads or special offers, because why would I? Unless I'm on an e-commerce website and you've got something that says 20% off and I'm in that mental space, then I might look at it. Everything else, less likely. So position on a screen is important. If it's here or here, it's less likely to get looked at, which, rule number one could argue, or whatever rule number we'll run to right now after scanning. If you've got something really important, you don't only mention it in your related links or in your right-hand column. You also mention it in the content area, because that's where people are going to be looking, predominantly. Rule number 1.5 or 2 is the more that something looks like an advert, if you zoom in here, you can see this is a nice graphic design that someone spent lots of hours agonizing over. If it looks like an advert, all things being equal, people will ignore it, because it's an advert. And that's what you have to do online in order to get anything done. If you look at all the adverts on every page, you'd never get anywhere online. And life's too short. So, your online audience tend to exhibit these behaviors, your average online audience, so to speak. Impatient, impulsive, don't pay attention, without wishing to offend anyone, think attention deficit disorder, think someone sitting down, lifting their brain out of their head and putting it down next to them, and just pointing and clicking, going around the place very, very quickly. So, that being the case, lovely clip art there to try and bring the point home, that being the case, we need to make sure our sites are pretty calm, pretty well organized, and have quite an obvious flow. That where the information is, what it is you want people to do, should be obvious. You can't, as I say, just throw stuff at a wall and hope that they read that wall and then figure out what's relevant to them. That doesn't work so well. You need to do more planning than that, more design than that. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, one hopes. Right, so that's a relatively short introduction to how people behave online, but I hope you all agree it was reasonably useful, and from your own intuition, your own experience, you can probably see how your behavior probably conforms to that. Is there anything that anyone would like to bring up at this point before we plough on to defining, measuring usability? Yes?
I was just wondering, like, you were talking about how people behave online and how they ignore the adverts and stuff.
Yes.
So, do you think that's because they've sort of like learnt where the adverts are placed, or is it something that sort of naturally happened from day one?
Oh, that's an interesting point. I think it's largely cultural, by which I mean that they just assume that information at the top and on the right-hand side is going to be non-relevant to them, because in 99% of cases that is the case. They also assume that information that looks a certain way, i.e. not text, but animation, stuff like that, whiz-bang stuff, is almost always an advert. So they've learnt that assumption. So that's why certain studies have shown that Google text ads work really quite well, because they look like information, they look like words, so people haven't yet trained themselves to not read them or not scan them quite quickly. So yes, it's the fact that people have learned that that's how adverts look, and that's where adverts tend to be. And so it's more that behavior than anything else. And it's also, of course, the fact that when people are online, they're in sort of a very lean-forward, interactive mode, so they're looking to point and click and do stuff. Whereas if you're watching Coronation Street, you're kind of, you're relaxed about it, and you're willing to watch 3 minutes of adverts because you're a cup of tea, digestive, nothing better to do with your life. Why not? But when you're online, you're not really in that passive mode. You're more about getting stuff done so you can go home early, or maybe not you, me. I want to go home early.